There are various EMF type devices out there that can cause us hardship and personal injury. People need to recognize it is a real thing. It is a real threat that could cause them harm. Even when the solar CME is right at the Earth, they still can't really predict how much impact that's going to have until it's already happening. It will happen eventually. We're a little past due for a large-scale CME to hit the Earth. Is it possible to happen tomorrow? Yeah, it's possible. It will destroy our modern electrical grid and will cause huge loss of life around the world. Life would get really difficult really fast.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back once again with Dr. Arthur T. Bradley, who is a NASA engineer, former military man, and an author of both fiction and nonfiction preparedness-related books. We're glad to have him on today, obviously, to talk a little bit about some current event stuff, talk about electromagnetic pulse, what it is, but we're also going to be talking about some gadgets that you have created and I'm really excited about. We're going to try to do the topic today. I'm not going to spill the beans. I'm going to let you introduce it. But I think that the chain of escalation of events right now would be something along the lines of cyber attack, electromagnetic pulse, then some sort of nuclear engagement. What are your thoughts on that in terms of when in EM, or what is an EMP, first of all, for people who don't know, and when it would be actually utilized in the context of strategically by a country?
Sure. Yeah, so an EMP really refers to a couple of different kind of attacks. One of them is more of a localized EMP attack over, let's say, a facility, a military base, that sort of thing. We actually did that. My understanding is we did that in Iraq, for example, detonated small bombs that would do EMPs to disrupt communications and things like that. But when most people think of EMP, they think of something a little bigger, a little broader, and that's a high altitude nuclear EMP, where you take a nuclear warhead high up into the atmosphere, detonate it specifically with the intent of not causing physical damage at the surface, but rather to disruptive all the electronics down at the surface, and most importantly, the power grid. And so this powerful wave of electromagnetic energy comes down, creates a bunch of currents, damaging currents at the surface of the Earth, and anything with long conductors for sure is susceptible. A lot of energy gets flowing around, power grid gets taken out, transformers get damaged, that sort of thing. Any kind of control system, very likely to be damaged. Even freestanding electronics like your phone or your radios, even maybe vehicles could be damaged. And so basically anything with modern microprocessors in them have a very good chance of being damaged by a nuclear EMP. So it's viewed as an asymmetric attack, meaning that for one small thing, you can cause all kind of tremendous damage. It's also a very difficult attack to know what to do about. If you don't intercept the missile in time and it goes off, there's not much you can do about it. And it's not quite the same as if somebody attacks Washington, D.C. and destroys our capital, right? It's game on, it's war, we're all in, right? I'm sure, right? But if somebody detonates an EMP and no one sees it, there'll be half the people in the United States who say it didn't even happen. I mean, they really will, right? Just based on where we are as a country. And so it's one of those cases where you have to convince people there was even an event and what the damage was and that we should do something about it. It'd be very complicated how to retaliate. So it would probably end up being a lot of hardship for some people and, maybe something different for other parts of the country where they didn't feel the effects of it. So it's an interesting attack. Some people don't even believe it's real. But it is, in fact, we use it in war now. It's been known about for about 60 years or so.
Yeah, and we've done numerous videos with you on the channel where you demystify the EMP. It's interesting that you say we've used this sort of technology before on the battlefield. I'm not sure if you can talk a bit more about these tactical EMPs and what they are and how exactly they're used. I know David Pine had talked about something similar. Could you maybe get more specific with what kind of weapons?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of that is classified in terms of where exactly it was used. There were reports came out in the media of not at the time, but later that EMPs had been used in, let's say, the Iraq conflict to try and do some disruption of military bases and communications. And I suspect they've had EMPs used in Ukraine, for example. This wouldn't be no surprise at all, right, to try and disrupt some facility or something using electromagnetics. It's not unheard of. Now, where you would hear about it is if there was a high altitude nuclear EMP, because the expanse of it would be so large that other countries would feel the effects. So I don't think that has occurred in quite some time. Russia had done their own testing a while back on some of their cities, but we haven't seen that used in war that I know of.
So when the media says Russia is using electronic warfare, what do they mean by that?
Well, that can mean a lot of different things. That can mean certainly disruptive type energy where they're trying to prevent communications. It can mean cyber type warfare where you're trying to disrupt electronic functions of different sorts. It can even mean eavesdropping and corrupting communications for different effects. There's a lot of different aspects to that.
So you have a new device which measures EMF radiation. And you also have devices that detect EMP. And perhaps you can show us some of those today. But what is the difference, I guess, between an electromagnetic pulse and EMF radiation? Are they one and the same? Is there overlap, obviously?
Yeah. So an EMP is a specific type of electromagnetic emission, right? You detonate a bomb, you create a large, powerful wave. Typically, they're very narrow in time. They're like a really sharp pulse, right? And that sharp pulse couples energy into lots of different kinds of electronics and can cause damage. EMF is a more general term, meaning electromagnetic fields, right? And so an EMP has electromagnetic fields that are emitted from it for sure, and they have very specific fields that can be harmful. But when people are talking about EMFs, they're usually talking about more mundane electromagnetic fields that they see around them, or that they experience around them, right? From Wi-Fi and cell phones and nearby cell towers, radar dishes, things like that, there's an open debate of whether or not any of that means anything, whether it has any harmful effects on people or not. And so it's an interesting topic to talk about as long as you don't let too much passion get into it, where you cloud your thinking and you can't listen to the other side's concerns or opinions. I get emails all the time, every few weeks at least, where somebody writes and says, essentially they feel like they're being harmed by electromagnetic field energy. And sometimes they believe it's the CIA attacking them. Sometimes they believe it's just, the neighbor's powerful Wi-Fi signal coming through the wall. Lots of different reasons. And probably most of that is not related to EMFs affecting them. It's probably something else, their own health problems or mold in the walls or something else that they don't know about. And it's an invisible enemy that people are quick to point at. And the problem with that is, of course, if you point at an invisible enemy, other people are going to go, there's nothing there, right? And logically, they're going to question whether or not you're kind of just making something up or you're misled. So there's a whole thing around tinfoil hat. Anytime I post something about EMF, as everybody's, this guy's wearing his tinfoil hat, get your hats out, meaning that it's all just nonsense, right? So it'd be nice to talk about it and what do we know and what are the concerns, and maybe that will help people sort through it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, there's the risk of throwing the baby out with the bathwater there, as they say, because it's one thing to take it to its utmost extreme that, 5G is killing us and, we're all going to die in 5 years, to, well, maybe there is some very subtle effects that this might be having on our physiology that we're not going to know for many, many years. To just think that, it's nothing, it doesn't have to be all or none. It could be there's nuance in this.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe you could just expand a bit more on what it is and what the potential risk factors are.
Sure. Yeah. So I like to start with everybody just getting on the same page of that EMFs can be harmful to you, right? Some people won't admit that, but then you start asking a few questions and they will come around to that. So certainly, if I shine a laser in your eye, it's potentially harmful. I think we'd all agree that is the case. And of course, that type of light energy is a type of EMF, very high frequency, but still EMF. The military has, as you probably know, they have systems that they mount on mobile carriers, like on Humvees, like the active denial system is a very well-known one. It's a millimeter wave system. It operates at about 95 gigahertz. It's declassified now. And it's primarily for deterrence of people trying to enter areas. So if I have a base and I'm monitoring the gate and people decide they're going to storm the gate and I turn on this large antenna system, it'll hit them at about 500 meters away. So pretty far away, it'll light them up. And it's excruciating by all accounts. Within 2 seconds, just the natural instincts in the brain will make people turn and run. and no one has withstood it in more than about that amount of time.
And just so people know, there's plenty of videos on this. They use it for riot control. Active denial it's a relatively old technology, I guess.
About 20 plus years, but very effective still. They've had people challenge it before. I think I can make it 3 or 4 seconds. It's just excruciatingly painful. Essentially burns right at the skin because it's such high frequency. So again, my whole point is just electromagnetic energy, if in the right frequencies and in the right intensity levels, can certainly cause you harm, right? No question about it. They had to be very careful with that system, that they controlled the pulse durations so that they didn't kill people. That was the big concern, is we're going to leave it on too long or there'll be a malfunction and it will light up the crowd for too long and everybody will just drop dead, right? It will just all cook them. So it's very dangerous to do that sort of thing. Not to say we are normally exposed to those levels, only that indeed, if you have the right levels at the right frequencies, you can certainly cause harm. As you pointed out, like an EMP, well, that's an electromagnetic field releasing device that can certainly cause us hardships. It may not cause us physical harm, like it's not going to fry our eyes or anything, but it's going to cause us lots and lots of problems. Mostly due to loss of our utilities and infrastructures, right? And so there are various EMF type devices out there that can cause us hardship and even injury, personal injury. And so I like to just sort of start, and if we all agree that if things are not right, we could definitely cause you injury. It's why we have microwave ovens that are closely sealed up with all the little grids, on the screens. If you didn't have that microwave energy would come out and essentially cause you lots of harm. It would start cooking your tissue. So again, there's potential for harm. Now the question is, the things that are around us, can they ever harm us? And that's certainly much more open to debate. And there's been a lot of studies over the time, probably at least the last 30 years, which has looked at everything from power lines, right? When I was a kid, there was a big thing back in the 70s of the power lines are going to kill us all, because if you're too close to the power lines, those big fields come around the power lines, they're going to cause our kids to grow up with an extra arm or something. And they did a lot of studies back in those years, and a number of things came out of it. One is they found out that the fields drop off so quickly around power lines. They're just incredibly fast, that as long as you maintained a modest distance from them, you really felt no electromagnetic effects from them. And I verified that. I went out and did some measurements. So that was good to know. And over years, over the last couple of decades, they found that indeed people didn't seem to suffer much harmful effects from those low frequency EMFs. All right. So fair enough. They built little channels around these power lines so that nobody can build houses too close. There's barriers that have to be maintained, and all that worked out fine. High frequency EMFs are still being kind of experimented with, right? We've had cell phones now for a while, and so frequencies like 900 megahertz, which is what a lot of cell phones run on, we know that as long as you keep the power level down to around, a watt or something, you can use them infrequently and everyone won't die of brain cancer, right? Does it cause an increase in brain cancer? Probably. They've had a number of studies that said, there looks like there could be an effect on increasing rates of brain cancer, but only for people who are routinely exposed to that high frequency energy, right? Where the debate is more open, I guess, is in the very high frequencies, right? Where you're getting higher and higher than just, let's say, 900 megahertz. And now you're exposing people to multiple gigahertz frequencies or even tens of gigahertz frequencies like 5G. And I'm not a 5G scare person. I don't run around trying to scare people on 5G, but it's in many different frequency bins. Most of our towns, like in the town I live in, 5G is at 2.4 gigahertz, which is kind of a standard frequency. In other towns, maybe where you're talking about, where there's antennas being put up all over the place, it's at a much higher frequency. It might be in the tens of gigahertz, 20, 30, 40, 50 gigahertz. That's not a frequency we as human beings have been exposed to like in a routine fashion regularly. So could there be harmful effects? Yeah, of course there could be, right? We don't know yet. Did we test it on mice and rats? Sure we did. But are we mice and rats? No, we're not, right? We're different beings. And so I leave it, I'm open-minded about that sort of thing. I try not to panic about it, but I do try and keep an open mind that people may have concerns about that.
Yeah, it's, I watched a town hall debate, and some of the owners of one of these companies was questioned as to whether or not they had done any testing, and they basically said that they hadn't done any testing. And this has been a hotly debated topic in Congress, and for good reason. Like you say, there's potential detrimental effects. So, You know, it's not something we should just write off. I guess somebody would say, well, these lower frequency EMFs, is there any risk that cumulatively they can cause damage? Like you got your cell phone and you got, TVs on, and like, is there some sort of interactive effects?
Right. And I don't know that that answer is fully known. It's certainly something you would think about, right? You could take a little bit of a lot of things, right? But if you take too much of it, sometimes you can get harmful effects from it. And it is true, we're bombarded with various electromagnetic fields all the time, from our Wi-Fi in our house to our cell phones. So we've got a nearby Air Force base, and they're doing radar and so forth. So if I take out my spectrum analyzer and I turn it on and I sense all the environment, I see all kind of spikes of things coming and going where things are turning on and off. So certainly I'm exposed to that energy. Now, to be fair, it's not ionizing energy. It's not ionizing radiation, meaning it's not at such a high frequency level like X-rays and gamma rays that it will actually strip the electrons off of atoms. That's what ionizing means. And so people will argue, if it's not ionizing, it doesn't hurt you. But again, microwave ovens aren't ionizing radiation either, but they can certainly harm you, right? The active denial system is not ionizing radiation, but it'll cook you, right? So the question of, hey, can we have a whole bunch of small sources around us that might cause us long-term harm? Yeah, possibly. I think possibly. Many studies have looked at various single sources and said, it looks like it doesn't affect most people. But in the long run, I wouldn't be surprised if in 20 years from now, our kids are reading a report about, hey, those guys back in the 2020s, they were probably having too much electromagnetic fields around them and they had some detrimental effects from it. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it wouldn't shock me. I kind of make it thinking of like cigarettes back in the day, right? When we were kids, there was not all those studies that said, when I was a kid, they weren't all those studies that said it was going to cause you all this harm. Really didn't come out until a little bit later. And I'm not trying to compare the two. I'm just saying that that kind of thing does happen over time sometimes.
Absolutely. So is there other types of EMF? Like, I've heard of this thing called Havana syndrome. What is that all about?
Oh, that's super interesting. I did a bit of reading on that. I tried to get on the panel actually that reviewed that data of the diplomats that were affected. I wrote a letter to the congressman and asked them if they put me on it. They didn't put me on it, unfortunately, because I was so interested in it. But basically back in 2016, everybody might know, we started getting diplomats who started suffering strange phenomena where they either would lose their hearing or they would suffer concussion type damage to their brains, which was really strange. And no one could figure it out. In fact, today it remains a bit of a mystery. They did enough digging in, they had enough commissions to look at it that they understood what happened. And it occurred not just in Cuba, but it was in China and India and Europe. And I think even Washington, D.C., we had some events. I don't know, but I think some Canadians were involved in the Cuban one. But so what happened was they had embassy staff essentially started reporting these strange symptoms of sudden onset headaches, nausea, those sorts of things, right? And it was a lot of weird things because they did a bunch of brain scans and they found some damage or differences in the brain structure than what it should have been. There had been some changes to it, which was really odd. At least one or two of the people suffered hearing loss, permanent hearing loss. And some of the people reported hearing like a buffeting sound when it was occurring. And that's a classic symptom. It's called Frey's effect, F-R-E-Y, the Frey effect, of pulse microwave energy. If there's nearby pulse microwave energy and it's directed towards you, the brain, something about the canal in the ear convinces your brain that modulation is sound, and you start hearing a buffeting sound. Other people wouldn't hear it if it's not impingent on them. So it was sort of a classic symptom of maybe this was pulse microwave energy affecting these people. That's my belief. It was probably pulse microwave energy, but others disagree. And their argument is that, hey, there were people in the next room who did not feel it. It was like directed. It was like it just affected a person. And they didn't know of any weapon, any microwave weapon that was that precise in its directionality, right? Where I could just target your head, but not get the guys in the next room. And so they were reluctant to believe that it was a microwave energy type weapon, but I don't know what else it could have been. There were people who thought it was infrasonic, meaning below the hearing level of humans, some kind of infrasonic vibration, or maybe ultrasonic. But I think the consensus of the experts at the end of the day was something around the 3 to 30 gigahertz, which is certainly in our range of this microwave, was pulsed at people and caused them, pulsed with the intent of harm and caused them some form of harm, either concussive type damage or hearing loss, that sort of thing. And no one's exactly sure why it was done. Maybe it was a test. Maybe it was to disrupt something. Maybe it was for political gain. Who knows? But it's a very interesting idea that could be this invisible weapon, essentially something out at a distance that could target individuals enough to cause them to be disrupted, where they can't function and they're feeling ill. There were stories of ambassadors who would get this feeling. They would have to go into the centermost room of the building and essentially sit in the toilet stall to try and keep them where he didn't have that feeling in his head. Very strange, attack, if you think about that. So anyway, it's been interesting to me. I don't know the answer to it, other than to tell people that, these people who suffered it were not delusional people. They were suffering. They were professionals. They did not want to have it happen. Many of them have long-term effects from it. And so such things are possible, was my takeaway.
Yeah, they're definitely possible. I recall seeing a documentary about a sound gun, and it allows you to send a sound wave like targeted at a person. So only they would hear, and they do these experiments where they go out in like a crowded place. So do you think this Havana syndrome, would that have been coming from the ground? Could something like that be done from space? I mean, I know it's kind of getting into the land of tinfoil, but
yeah, well, it's not crazy. I mean, we can attack from space. We can't attack that I know of with microwave energy, because energy has a way, just like all wave energy, of sort of spreading out, right? And so the further away you are, that energy spreads out and gets weaker and weaker. And it also drops very quickly with distance. So my guess is that if it's a microwave energy weapon, which is probably what it was, they were probably within, hundreds of meters of the person. And they probably had to have visual line of sight, where either infrared or something where they knew where the person was to be able to target them adequately through the wall or the window or whatever they were doing through. I may be way off the mark, but that's my guess. I'm thinking of, some guy sitting across the street in a black van pointing it out the window kind of thing. Was that what happened? I don't know. But I don't think it was from space.
And why would they do it to diplomats as the test subject and not, what is the relationship between what you're talking about and like a directed energy weapon? Is that something similar?
Yeah, so lasers now, you can hit very, very long distance targets because they don't get that spreading electromagnetic energy type thing. They're collimated light. And so very similar idea is you concentrate this energy wave, right? In the case of a laser, you're able to direct it better. And certainly we did a bunch of experiments with tactical high altitude shooting down missiles and airplanes with lasers. I know we have fielded such systems. I think the THD is one of them. And what they do is they essentially are able to track the incoming target, light it up for a few seconds with this very powerful laser, and essentially destroy it. It's interesting technology. I don't know. I always thought that would be the future of the battlefield, was these state-of-the-art laser type systems that you could zap from space and maybe shoot up and high up in the atmosphere. But I'm not sure. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to do that, and you have to have precise tracking and all those things. And you can cause damage to things you didn't intend, that are in the path. And so it could be that it's proven to be more of a very specialized weapon, where you got to hit something and you got to, you don't have the ability to get to it. You can't send a missile to hit it. So you have to be able to hit it with this laser. That's my guess, is it's more of a very specialty type weapon. Maybe one day we may have very practical mainstream military weapons in space. I think it's almost inevitable, right? But whether they're lasers or rail guns or other things are sort of open to debate, but it's certainly, a battlefield that we're moving into and our enemies are moving into as well.
Interesting. You talk a little bit about this thing called the Moscow signal. What is that all about?
Yeah, that was just when the Havana thing all came up, people started talking about the Moscow signal. And I had to look that back up because it's been a little before my time. But for around 20 years, there was an embassy in Moscow, a U.S. embassy, where they were being exposed to microwave frequencies around 2.5 to 4 gigahertz. So around the frequencies we have for our Wi-Fi. Our Wi-Fi is 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, depending where you're at. And so around those frequencies at pretty low power levels, like 50 milliwatts per square meter, which is below our max recommended levels, a lot below, less than 1%. But over a long period of time, this facility was just being inundated with this microwave energy, which nobody noticed for a long time, I guess. But eventually they noticed it and they started wondering, what's all this from? Where is this energy coming from? And I think they concluded it was eavesdropping equipment, that it wasn't an intentional, let's slowly kill these Americans. It wasn't like a long-term plan. It was more of let's eavesdrop. And they had these listening devices that were running on these frequencies and reporting out. But it became such a worry back in those days that they had to shield the entire facility to try and bring down those fields, which they did. I think they eventually demolished the building because they were worried about the eavesdropping anyway. But what was interesting is for a long time, everyone just said, they studied the data and they said it never hurt anybody. It was just incident microwave energy, but it was at low enough power levels, nobody was ever hurt. But there was a study that came out, I guess, out of Spain just a couple of years ago that said they looked at the staff over long periods of time and found that their mortality rates were worse than a normal person. And they couldn't correlate it specifically with that event, but they could say that those people who were in the embassy tended to die sooner and they had more cancer problems than those who were not there on average. And so, it's another just small data point. It doesn't prove anything explicitly. But if I were in that embassy for a long period of time, I would wonder, did that cause me some kind of problems, that others might not have experienced? And taking one step forward, again, not here to scare anybody, but are we kind of in the same environment in some situations, in our workplace especially, where we're at those low field levels, doesn't hurt us, we're all good, all is good. But maybe over a few decades, maybe it would cause some problems for us. And it's hard to correlate those things because there's so many other factors, right? I'm not eating good, Joey smokes near me. There's all these factors affecting my health. It's very difficult to pinpoint on one factor like that.
Well, what about Wi-Fi, especially people who live in these apartments and condos where you got like 20 different Wi-Fi signals coming through you at once? Isn't that on the same frequency?
Yeah, that's 2.4 gigahertz primarily, same as your microwave oven. Amazingly, almost everything runs at 2.4 gigahertz. It's just one of those bands they can run a lot of stuff at. Newer Wi-Fi sometimes run in the 5 gigahertz band as well. Just gives them better data rates, but most of it's 2.4 gigahertz. And fortunately, it doesn't like just stack, like they're not in sync with each other. So this guy's got one, this guy's got one. They don't just line up and double up the strength on me. Instead, it's just a wash of energy that's out of sync with each other, right, coming over us, which really gives us just more exposure time than it would intensity level per se. But yeah, if I turn on my Wi-Fi sensor, I can pick up 6 of them just from my neighbors, and stuff. And if I was in a small apartment building, I could probably pick up a lot more than that. So it does make you wonder. Now, to be fair, Wi-Fi, like all RF energy, drops off very quickly with distance. And so for each doubling of distance, the power level goes down by a factor of 4. So if at 1 meter, you're 4 watts per square meter. If you go to 2 meter, you cut down to 1, right? It goes down by a factor of 4. And so if you can put a little distance between you and the sources, it's almost immeasurable, even with a good piece of equipment. You just can't measure it. But if you're right next to, like in my case, my computer in the other room, my Wi-Fi booster is like 5 feet from my computer. And it started to get me thinking. I was like, well, yeah, okay, that's pretty close to me. How much am I seeing here? And I got out my fancy, expensive meters and started taking all these measurements. And it was pretty high. It was within a few feet of those routers, you get pretty high levels. Just like in front of a microwave, I did a little video for the channel. And if you're within a couple of feet of the microwave, there's no doubt you're getting high levels of fields because it's allowed to leak a certain amount of energy, higher than the normal amount you're supposed to be exposed to, even because they figure you're not going to be exposed very often to it. So yeah, you can get levels if you're near strong sources. And that's why when we talk about the device, most people don't have an EMF meter. And even if they did, are they really going to take out the meter every so often and interrogate their environment? Probably not. You'd look like a little bit of a kook if you're at Subway sandwiches and you've got your meter going.
With your gas mask.
Yeah, like the gas mask kind of thing. It seemed a little impractical. And the truth is, most of those meters are garbage. You pay 30, 40, $50 on the web, and it's all built in China, and it's very insensitive, inaccurate products. So I don't recommend them for high frequency measurements at all. They're just not very good. And there are good ones, but they're very expensive, thousands of dollars for good meters. And those meters will tell you, hey, this is so many watts per square meter right here, exceeds the threshold. It gives you a little warning and so forth. But they're not really practical for people to do unless you were like really, really worried about it and you wanted to survey an area or something. I think there's even companies you can pay that will come out and do an EMF survey on on a particular area that you're in. It's probably not practical for most people again, but if you were really worried about it, you could pay someone with one of those fancy meters to come out and, sniff the area with you and then create a little report of where the areas had the highest fields. I went a different way altogether, which was, can you make something like really small and really cheap that people could just give them an indication, like yes, no kind of thing of our field levels really high right here. So we can talk about that too.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I'd like to talk about shielding and stuff, but let's talk about this device.
Yeah. So the device that I invented just recently, this is brand new. It was really more of a labor of love is what I call it. It was an interest of mine that I wanted to know two things. One, can I detect RF energy around me really, really cheap? Like instead of building a sophisticated meter, just something really simple. And two, can I do it where it will last forever, where I never have to change any batteries, right? Because that's one of the big hassles is if you have these meters, the batteries are running out or they're leaking, it's just a mess. So can you use the energy in the air to power the circuit that then tells you there's energy in the air? That's the idea of it. And it's not crazy. It sounds crazy, but it's actually a process called energy harvesting. And if you search the web for energy harvesting, you'll see that people have been doing it for about, 30 years or so. But it's difficult to do much with it because, as you can imagine, there's so little energy, to pick out of the air to use that you can't do much with it. But so what I did is I came up with a device. Yeah. And what they do is they have a couple of antennas on them. And the antennas are tuned to those frequencies we're most exposed to, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz bands. And they bring in that energy and they try and collect as much of it as they can, as efficiently as they can. And that's the trick. And then they drive an indicator, a red light, if the level gets above a certain threshold. That's the idea. And that's all it does, is it just says, light lights up. Hey, I'm in an area where there's quite a bit of field here. It's above about 1% of what the maximum recommended amount on average is that I should be exposed to. So it tells you if I'm sitting right next to the Wi-Fi, my thing will light up. It says you're probably getting more field than you'd want. Okay. If I hold it up to my microwave when I'm cooking, indeed, I can tell where the fields start getting weaker and weaker. Now, if you walk through your house, it'll never light up. People go, this thing doesn't work. Look, my phone doesn't set up. It's really for things that are very strongly emitting 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band frequencies, like a microwave or a Wi-Fi router. Some cell phone systems will work on 2.4, but some don't. And again, it's just a thumbs up. Yep, I'm not being exposed to too much right here. Or if these levels are high enough to light this thing, I probably should move a little distance away.
Would 5G towers trigger that even though they're a bit further away? Is the drop off a little?
It's doubtful unless they were close. And again, 5G runs at different frequencies. So if 5G was running at 2.4, which is it does in my community, and you're close to an antenna, sure, it would light it up. If you're 100 meters away, 200 meters away from the antenna, almost certainly no way. Because again, that energy drops so quickly that you wouldn't be. You likely would not light it up. You can put them like right next to your phone and switch on and off your Wi-Fi on your phone, and it'll light it up as it switches on and off, for example. But the normal Wi-Fi that's running around you and the normal 5G and stuff is actually way below 1% of the max level you should be exposed to. It's, people are worried about it, but it's still really, really low in terms of its emissions. So some people say, well, I want to know, anytime it's even slightly elevated, but you really don't, because then it's just light all the time, right? And then you don't have any way of discriminating. So the question is, well, where's a reasonable discriminator? And the number I came up with was 1%. If you're at 1% of the max recommended average value, let me know. And if you're below that, let's not worry about it. if you're above that, it's just going to get brighter and brighter and brighter. All right. So that was kind of the discriminator. Now, to my luck, that's about the most you can. That's about as sensitive as you can make something that has no battery in it. That's just using some ambient RF energy to read it. You can't read teeny tiny because you can't light the light. There's not enough energy to actually light the light. So about the 1% number is about where it is right now.
So the redder the light, the stronger the light. Does that mean it's beyond 1%?
Yeah, at 1%, it's on. It's distinguishable. It's on. The light's on. I'm at 1%. But so, for example, if you play around with the one I sent you, if you turn on your microwave oven, if you go right up to the door, like the seam of the door, it'll get really bright because the level's not 1%. It's actually at least 100% of what you're supposed to be exposed to. And then as you come away, it'll get a little bit fainter, and eventually it'll just blink out. So it creates kind of a region that says this area is strong enough to light the light. And I probably don't want to keep my head stuck in here for long periods of time, which we do.
Is it possible then, well, I guess theoretically it is, but is it practical to make the device so that it does give you that gauge of whether it's like 1%, 5%? Like, is there some way that you could, have it correspond to the brightness of the light? Or
you certainly could. You could, so I designed it where at 1% the light turns on, right? You could have parallel circuitry, let's say, where a different light lights at 5% and 20%, so that it's kind of like a sliding scale, right? Where it said, hey, holy mackerel, I'm on the highest light. We're really powerful. Yeah. But again, most environments will never even light 1%. And so it just seemed like a reasonable thing of, does it matter if I'm 100% or 10%? Probably not. Those are unusually high fields anyway. I really don't want to sit in those for too long anyway. And it also lets people sort through what might be something different. Like I said, many people have written me and said, I'm being bombarded by these EMFs from whoever, but they couldn't seem to, it might give them a way to say, hey, it's not that high here. So maybe there's something else going on, so it gives them that indication too. And I don't even think I said the product name. It's called the EMF Beacon, BEACON, Beacon. And again, it's just a little portable keychain type device.
Yeah, we'll be sure to post a link in the description. How much do they cost?
Well, they cost $39 on emfbeacon.com. And like I said, it was really kind of an experiment for me to build these things. It's a hassle, I'll be honest with you. I'm not in production mode. I had a number made for your customers that might want them, but at any given day, I may just stop making them. It's not a money-making thing for me. It's just an interest of mine that it's amazing.
I'm surprised that something like this hasn't been created yet. Like, I mean, you'd think even if just as a novelty party trick sort of thing, like something like you'd think that these things would be. I mean, I'm sure some Chinese company is going to see this now and rip off your idea.
$5 a day, yeah.
And I mean, I filed a patent on it and that sort of thing, but by the time all that's figured out, the Chinese would have 15 million of them out, it'd be hard to beat that. But yeah, it's just an interest of mine that there were kind of two questions. Again, can you make something really cheap that detects high levels of fields? And can you do it where it'll just kind of last forever? Somebody can just keep it on their keychain and never have to worry about changing the battery, never have to worry about it going out. These things, in theory, if you don't drop it or let it get, drop in a puddle of water or something, it just lasts basically forever. The electronics, at least, I mean, they don't wear out. So,
yeah, I mean, I definitely want one, and I'd encourage people to go and pick one up. I'm sure you have a limited supply, so they'll probably all get sold out in this video, hopefully, because I think it's a pretty cool device. What about shielding? So, okay, we have all these waves going through us. Is there any way to effectively shield ourselves from it?
Yeah, so the two ways in general to keep EMFs down, to reduce them, is just like you said, one of them is to put distance, and it works extremely well. I can't overemphasize that enough. Putting distance between you and the source just works fantastic. But you got to know where the source is. That's a lot of times our problem. We don't know. So many people resort, if they're really hypersensitive, and there are people who 100% convinced they're hypersensitive to EMF. Who am I to say they're not, right? I don't know. So they buy products like shielding shirts. They're just like t-shirts made out of a silk fabric. that are made with silver threads. And so instead of cotton, they have silver thread. They're very nice. They're very comfortable. They're very expensive. You might pay, I don't know, $100 or more for a t-shirt, maybe a couple $100. But for people who are really worried about it, they think it might help their heart or whatever. Maybe they have a pacemaker and they're worried about that. They'll look at options like that. Other people will wear hats, and this is where the tinfoil hats come in, right? The baseball caps with the lining and stuff. Again, does it reduce the fields that your brain experiences? Oh, you bet it does. It absolutely does, because that energy is going to get reflected off the metal and absorbed by the metal. Does it make a difference to your long-term health? I don't know. I have no idea. But it's not crazy as people act. The other one people do is they'll sometimes buy bedding, like sheets that are made out of conductive threads. Again, it's usually not silver, but it's some type of conductive threads. And they'll sleep with that over them, just like any other sheet. And it's actually a pretty good idea because it's a long period of time where you're covered, right? You reduce your exposure for 8 hours of every day. And people will swear by it, that it really helps them. Or they'll build a canopy you can buy for a couple $1,000s, a good quality canopy that goes up around your bed, kind of like the mosquito netting that you might have in a jungle environment, except it's made with this conductive cloth. And again, greatly reduces your EMF exposure. Some people swear by it, say it's the best money they've ever spent. I don't sell them or anything. I'm just saying other people probably would never know the difference, but there is such things. There are shielding type products that people use to try and reduce their exposure. Now, it's much more difficult to just shield like your house. Like, let's say you said, oh, I just got to shield, my living room, right? And people have tried. The difficulty is you got windows, you got doors, you got entryways, you got, and the energy just finds its way in unless you really know what you're doing in terms of shielding. You have to have an expert get involved to create a true shielded space. And they need to bring those fancy meters out and conduct all these experiments with antennas and stuff. If you spend the money and like we do that for EMP hardening, right? We're talking about the electromagnetic pulse threat. There are many companies who go, we cannot afford to lose our electronics from an EMP. So Art, I want you to come in. I want you to shield this facility, or at least verify our shielding is good enough. And I'll come in with antennas and we'll set up, make all the measurements to make sure that the fields drop by 99.99% or something like that. So it is possible, but to do rooms or buildings, you really have to have that equipment to do it right.
Well, I have a great $1 million idea for you. How about the tinfoil suit? Okay, we're just going to make like EMP bags for people.
For people. I love it. With just a little eye slot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That will get us on the local news for sure.
Yes, I bet it would. We would have a whole special name for us. I don't know what we would be, but there would be a name for us. Yeah.
Well, you could make some sort of like Mylar infused hazmat suit or some kind of, metallic hazmat suit or something crazy like that. I'm sure it would.
That's how they were defeating the active denial system, actually. Was
really?
That exact idea. Yeah. They used tinfoil to coat basically cardboard shields, and people would rush up with these tinfoil barriers and they would line their clothes with tinfoil and enable them to essentially get past the worst of the active denial system. So you can deflect that energy, but you can't take much of it if it gets through. So
what you're saying is the conspiracy theorists were right.
I'm saying it's possible, right?
And we didn't land on the moon. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, let's not go down there. I do work for NASA during the day, so
yeah. I'm sure you get lots of comments about that. You do have a lot of other cool products on your website. I would encourage people to check out. You got the EMP detector. What's that all about? EMP alert.
Yeah, EMP alert is a small device that plugs into the wall, and its purpose is not to measure EMFs like the EMF beacon, but instead it's to detect when an EMP may have occurred. And so what happens is it monitors two things. It monitors the power lines that it's plugged into, and it's looking for really big disturbances, right? So not normal like load shedding or something like that, but like a gigantic spike coming in. And it's also looking at the environment around it, the air around it, the ambient environment. And so it has antennas in it. And if it sees a giant spike of energy on either of those, on the lines or in the air, it sounds an alarm. And it basically says, hey, we just got a really high level of electromagnetic pulse here. Now, if you were sitting in the middle of a gigantic thunderstorm, on occasion I hear people say, yeah, it went off. We had this huge crack of thunder, lightning, and it went off. And they actually were thrilled by it because that told them it picked it up, right? It measured it. But in general, it'll never go off. It'll just sit there quiet, just like things you don't want to, you're like, doesn't even work. But if there is a giant pulse of energy, it'll sound an alarm. And it actually has a few different modes. One mode is when the E1, E2 event occurs, which is the sudden, crack of a pulse, it'll sound a brief alarm, like for 2 or 3 seconds, it'll just give you a loud, annoying alarm. And then as the voltage on the power lines start to climb, which will happen for E3, that's the third phase of the EMP, the power line voltage will start to come up. The EMP alarm will just start to sound continuously. So the EMP alert just says, hey, the temporary alarm's come and gone, and now it's like the voltage levels are rising quickly. We're just going to turn on an alarm and let you know something's wrong. And what you would do in that case is you would go out and open the breaker to your house. You would trip the breaker so that rising voltage wouldn't just drive in and toast all your electronics in your home or your business.
So that would work for Solarflare and EMP.
Yeah, that portion, the E3 portion, would work for either one, the rising voltages on the power lines. Of course, solar doesn't have the big, crack of the sudden impulse, the E1, E2, but it does have E3. In fact, it's the threat from a solar event like that is this rising voltage and currents flowing on the power lines that damage all the transformers and stuff.
Yeah, maybe we should just come back to that topic in a minute. I'm just looking at some other products on your website right now. You have a lot of Faraday bags, and maybe you could just explain the concept of Faraday cages and bags for anybody who has no idea what we're talking about right now, which might be a good portion of the audience.
So a Faraday cage is really just a metal enclosed area. So you can take a piece of tinfoil and wrap it around a box, and you've created a Faraday cage. And we've done that many times in classes I've done. Or you can buy special bags that are already fully sealed metallized bags that, you just open up the top, stick your stuff in them and seal them back up. And they do fantastic for protecting from like an EMP. Because again, what a metal barrier does for high frequency energy is it does two things. It reflects the energy off of it. That's its primary mechanism of protecting things. But it also absorbs energy that tries to pass through it. And so it does those two things very well. And so typically like an EMP bag, you might get 99.7% of the energy reduced by the time you got inside the bag, which means even a full EMP outside is very unlikely to cause damage inside the bag. And so it's an inexpensive way to protect specific electronics, right? You have a radio or something, emergency radio, you don't want it to get damaged, you stuff it in an EMP bag, zip it up, and you're good. Or you can build a big galvanized garbage can, a big metal garbage can, seal up the lid really well. And again, it's almost certain to survive. Whatever's in there, almost certain to survive. So Faraday cages or Faraday bags are just kind of an inexpensive way to protect small scale electronics.
And you also have this EMP vehicle protection. What's that all about?
Yeah, so vehicles are just another like super complicated electronic system now, right? They have hundreds, if not 1,000 little microprocessors doing all kinds of stuff in them. And so they are susceptible to the E1, E2 of an EMP, not an E3, unless it's an electric vehicle that's plugged into the grid. But most vehicles are sitting by themselves. The E3 would never couple into them, but the E1, E2 could. And there was a bunch of tests, as you know, done by the EMP Commission, and lots of people are upset how they did the test, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they showed that vehicles were susceptible. You could cause upsets in vehicles. And certainly the more modern the vehicle, the more complicated it is, the more likely it is to be damaged. There's no categorically any vehicle before 1973 is safe, and anyone, there's nothing like that. It's just the more modern it is, the more likely it is to be damaged. So how do you protect it? Well, there's a couple of ways. The best way, as we talked about, is you can shield that whole thing when you're not driving it, right? You can drape a big cover over it that's conductive, and that does a great job. It's unlikely a covered vehicle like that would ever be damaged by an EMP. The problem is you're going to be driving that thing a lot, right? And you can't cover it every time. That's a pain. So disasterrepair.com, they do sell some products, some transient reducing products where you basically plug it into your cigarette lighter, you put it across your battery, and together they try and absorb transients that might couple into the cabling of the vehicle and spread around and cause damage. That's the idea of it. Very much like ferrites on power cords, it's not 100%. It's a mitigation strategy of I'm going to absorb some energy and try and buy down my risk that my vehicle is going to be damaged. It might still be upset. It might still stall out if an EMP happens. But what you're trying to do is keep the levels from getting too high that it just zaps things and destroys things. And those were products I came up with, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I keep them on my car. I'd be honest with you, it's a low cost investment for something so expensive and so important that I think it's a reasonable thing, reasonable precaution.
So I would encourage people to check out your website. It's really cool. Lots of cool stuff on here. Is there any other products that stand out for you that you feel are worth mentioning?
The car protection is probably the newest thing that we came out with that's of interest. And the EMP alert, we talked about that one as well. My role in the company primarily is now to develop cool stuff. And I didn't do this EMF beacon, by the way, through disaster preparedness. It's just my own, like I said, my own interest. And so it's got its own website, emfbeacon.com. But my role is what I love to do now, which is, let's think up interesting, effective products that aren't out on the market and make them and see how they work. And so people often write with suggestions, and your idea of the suit with the, just for fun, that's the kind of thing though, where people will write with suggestions and say, hey, have you thought about doing this kind of a product that might be helpful? And so we're working on that stuff right now. I don't want to spill any beans, but we have some interesting things that are coming out in this next year that I think will be, I want to come back on your channel and talk to you about them because they're pretty cool.
And where will people get the word on that when it does come out? Do they go through your YouTube channel or through emfbeacon.com or?
So emfbeacon.com is just my own personal little channel where I'm doing stuff related to EMFs. The disasterprepare.com is the main website where anything related to EMP preparedness is on there. And so you can go on there and sign up there's a little newsletter you can sign up for where they send out emails, I don't know, once every couple of weeks, just talking about political things happening or EMP threats or whatever it is. So if you want to get in on the mailing list, just go and sign up there. I think most of the things end up on YouTube as well. I make videos of the various topics and post them on YouTube as well. So if you're just if you signed up to the channel, EMP Doctor, you'll get some kind of announcement that I posted one.
Okay, very good. And I also wanted to ask you about, as you're a NASA engineer and all, and maybe you know a thing or two about this, but the solar activity. I keep hearing about coronal mass ejections coming our way. It seems to be more and more frequent. They're saying any day now we could have another Carrington event. What do you think the probability of something like that happening is? And would the Carrington event, if it happened today, what do you think the outcome would be? And if people don't know what that is, maybe if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So back in the 1850s, in that time frame, there was a large solar coronal mass emission that was seen from Earth. We knew it was coming. And it was a big, powerful wave of plasma, essentially solar plasma that came over the Earth. And back then in the 1800s, of course, we didn't have all of our modern electronics. We had telegraphs, and it was enough energy to couple into the telegraph wires and cause fires in telegraph stations and things. So it was a lot of energy. Those type of events only happen about every 150 years, right? Where they actually come to the Earth. I mean, they happen every day out from the sun, but the sun's facing a lot of directions, and we're one little dot out here that has to come our direction to get us. So we've dodged a number of close calls just in the last 15 years, where if they had hit us, it would have been like a Carrington event. But we were lucky. We haven't had anything major. I mean, relatively of that scale anyway. We were missed by them. So every 150 years, well, if you kind of count the years, 1859, we're in 2022, we're a little past due for a large scale CME to hit the Earth. So is it possible to happen tomorrow? Yeah, it's possible. Statistically, will it happen in the next 10 to 20 years? Yeah, it probably will. Just statistically, right? Is it for sure? No, it could be 120 more years before it happened, right? But it will happen eventually. The sun won't stop, burping out that energy toward us. And so then the question is, well, if it's going to happen, how affected are we going to be by it? And what do we do about it? And many people, like Dr. Pry, for example, was a well-known voice in this area, seemed convinced that it will destroy our modern electrical grid and will cause huge loss of life around the world. I'm not one to debate that. I don't necessarily disagree with it, to be honest. I do think it would greatly disrupt the electrical grids. Would it take down all of the grid? I don't know. All 5 interconnects, I'm not sure that it would, but it doesn't really matter. If you're in a giant region affected by it and there's no power for perhaps months, life would get really difficult really fast. So I don't disagree with any of that. It's a difficult thing to prepare for on a national level. We've had a commission look at it. We had, when Trump was president, he signed an executive order saying we should look at this, and they pulled together some people to look at it. And I had a chance to review some of those documents, but the short of it was never like to really take action. Like, let's harden the grid, right? Let's just make the grid where it can withstand the event. And there have been some entities that have worked toward that. I understand that Texas has worked toward that, making their grid harder from an EMP type of event, a solar CME or an EMP. But I don't think nationally or even worldwide, certainly, that we have done that. And so my guess is that we would see widespread outages. They would probably last a lot longer than things we're used to. Would it devolve into complete anarchy where we had, apocalyptic conditions? I doubt it. I don't know for sure, but as long as it didn't affect everybody, I just got to believe that people would come together and rescue and provide aid to others, right?
In the current climate, some countries might be opportunistic in event like that. They would take it as an opportunity to expedite some of their military plans, perhaps. So when you say 150 years, how do they know it only happens once every 150 years?
Well, I guess it's a statistical thing. We monitor the sun. We have a number of satellites in very close proximity to the sun. So we can tell statistically how often these things occur, these big CME plasma discharges, and then statistically where we are into those, what percentage of chance I are to hit us. And so you can come up with those things statistically. And that's the number I've always heard. It's just a ballpark number of about 150 years is when you'd expect them. So I always tell people we're a little past due if that number's to be believed. So it's definitely a real threat. I hope people, understand that an EMP or a big CME, it's not whether you believe in it or not, doesn't have any bearing on anything. If one of those things happen, there will be an effect on people's lives. It's the only question is how big of an effect because of where you live at and where that thing happens to occur. So is it worth bothering over? I don't know. Maybe you have bigger fish to worry about, like, snowstorms and other things. I get it. But it is something people need to recognize. It is a real thing. It is a real threat that could cause them harm.
Yeah, and we don't have any real historical examples besides the Carrington event because we've only been, having modern technology for a very minuscule sliver of our evolution. So for all we know, this happens a lot more frequently. And had we had technology for the last 2,000 years, we might have got hit 8 times by now. But I think, like you say, we don't have any framework to understand it. But it very well could happen, and even if it only affected even 10% of the planet, I mean, just imagine the impact on supply chains and the domino effect that could potentially happen. So it's not an all or none thing. I think is important to emphasize that it's not just lights out for the entire planet. It's going to be a gradation. It's going to be likely localized to certain parts of the planet, and obviously the part of the planet that was facing the sun at the time would get it. But do the waves come over a period of time, or is it like one blast?
Yeah, it's like a big plasma wave comes over the Earth, and it builds over the course of minutes, maybe even hours. And interestingly enough, I talked to some solar experts. I'm not a solar expert, but some guys in NASA that are experts of the sun. And I asked them, I said, well, if you saw it coming, right, you got like 2 days. A CME doesn't just appear. It doesn't go at the speed of light, unlike a solar flare, let's say. So it takes time, a couple days to get to the Earth. So you see it. Remember, we got satellites right there, and they see the big blob come off. They're going to radio ahead and say, hey, there's a big CME coming, and it's going to take a couple days to get here. And so there are a lot of people saying, if it's big enough and it's headed our way, we could just bring everything down, right? We'd go into a massive national blackout, let's say, and get ready for it, at least be in a low energy state. And we could do that. I think, like, politically, I don't know that we could, but I think technically we could. The question experts have posed is, would it make any difference? And many people said no. It's not based on whether or not the grid is on or off. The energy couples into those conductors either way, and that energy flows around that grid and goes up into the transformers. It's not like you can open, connections everywhere all over the grid. It's going to be main things that are opened up. And their argument was it might not have much effect to even bring the grid down. So that was really interesting to me. The other thing they told me was that even when the solar CME is right at the earth, it's starting to affect our fields and we're starting to get currents flowing, they still can't really predict how much impact that's going to have until it's already happening. It's not one of the things, we don't have a model that's good enough yet to go early in the thing, hey, we're in real trouble. We need to take actions X, Y, Z, Q, get ready for this thing. It's like only as it's really starting to occur that we go, oh man, we're in trouble. And by then it's difficult to take those kind of actions. So it's a tough national problem to solve unless we, as broader infrastructures looked at hardening things. And that's so expensive and requires so much political will. I don't know that we're going to do that.
Yeah, I know there's a new campaign. I think it was Dennis Quaid just recently did a video about, he hosted a documentary about this, and apparently there's some company that claims to be able to do it at a moderately low cost. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Great.
But that's very interesting that you point out that, I think it would have to happen first for us to actually take the threat seriously. Like, it's going to have a negative effect first before we proceed to hardening.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Believe it. And like you say, there's so much political division anyways. Right now, people would probably think, oh, it's just like, the World Economic Forum or something like that. There'd be people with all sorts of theories as to what was truly causing the blackout, or maybe they just want to shut the power off on us to, that sort of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it'd be almost impossible to, you need some sort of event to happen first before to validate that this is real thing for people. So fascinating stuff anyways. Let's hope that we still have some time to prepare. And I would encourage people to go and check out your YouTube channel and get a EMF beacon, I should say, while you can, because I'm sure they're in limited supply. But hopefully this compels you to make more, because I'm looking forward to getting mine and scaring people with it.
All right, do it.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today. Guys, definitely go and check out Arthur's channel. You won't be disappointed. Take care.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.